Welcome back to the Real Texas Radio Podcast with your host, Bronin. If this is your first time joining the Real Texas Radio Podcast, 1,000 welcomes. I've got a big show today. We are going to be talking about the election, the GOP runoff, and now the general election showdown between Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, and Low T, James Talarico, or Talafrico. The nicknames are still up for debate. What do you think he should be called? I'm also going to be talking about a little bit of Dallas drama, a little bit of Austin drama. So before we dive in, if you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, follow the Real Texas Radio Podcast from wherever you stream. If you're in one of those big streaming apps, please give the show 5 stars. Give us a like, download those episodes, maybe even a comment letting other potential listeners know what a great show the Real Texas Radio Podcast is. And you can also follow the Real Texas Radio Podcast and your host, Bronin, on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, now, you're listening to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Bronin, just a fed-up taxpayer bringing you all of your Texas, local, and national news. All right, let's talk about the U.S. Senate race. Obviously, we just had the runoff here in Texas. It was March 26th, Tuesday of this week. I early voted, and thank God I did, because I was supposed to be back Monday night from a weekend visit to some friends in Mississippi. My flight was canceled due to weather at DFW, and I didn't make it back home. I had to fly out of New Orleans. It was a day filled with planes, trains, and automobiles, and I would not have made it home in time to cast my vote on election day. So I'm glad I've stuck to my policy of typically voting early before there's any kind of a line. Although the turnout, it was much weaker for this runoff than in March 3rd for the primary. So the big race that everybody was keeping an eye on nationally, Fox News must have been covering it pretty heavily, because I had some friends in Massachusetts who were texting me about the race at wanting to know who did I support in the runoff. Did I choose Paxton or Cornyn? And, I got to be honest, I was undecided. Once the early voting period began, I didn't know what I was going to do. I told you that on March 3rd, I voted for John Cornyn, and I was conflicted. It seemed like everybody who I was keeping an eye on, everybody who I was curious about who they were going to be endorsing or voting for, what they were posting about on the internet, everybody was all over the place. For railroad commissioner, I think there was an appellate court, or we have 2 Supreme Courts here in Texas, one for criminal, one for civil. So there was a high court judge runoff. People were all over the place. And there were congressional races, of course. Colin Allred, he ultimately beat Julie Johnson, the fabulously wealthy white lesbian, beat her by about 10 points. And even though it seemed like she was a much more rigorous and intentional campaigner, she seemed to want it more than Colin Allred did. But the problem is the black voters. I don't think in this district we're going to be going for the fabulously wealthy white lesbian. She was banking on the Latinos showing up. All of her campaign ads kept pointing out some vote that Colin Allred allegedly cast to fund ICE. He was consorting with the Republicans. So, that's certainly... I'm not a Colin Allred voter, but had I taken a Democrat primary ballot, because sometimes I am a Democrat primary voter, if there's somebody who I think is going to likely win the seat because I live in a blue district and I want to get in there and do some damage, then I'll do that. But if I was following that strategy, I would have voted for Colin Allred too. So anyway, he won. And Al Green was defeated down in Houston, the guy with the cane who's been thrown out of the State of the Union address a few times, screaming at Trump like the TDS mental patient that he is. He was defeated by a new entrant, a young black guy. I don't know much about him. In any case, probably just before I went in to vote early, I started seeing chatter on X that Trump was going to be making an endorsement in the Senate race. And he ultimately did for Ken Paxton, and we know how that turned out.
And I don't say that in a braggadocious way, but it's true. I've been right about everything.
So Ken Paxton, he handily defeated John Cornyn, as you probably know. He got about, I think, 63% of the vote, maybe a little bit more. He earned almost 600,000 votes. John Cornyn, in contrast, he earned about a little bit over 350,000 votes after spending an exorbitant, I have seen a figure like $130 million was spent in that Senate race. Imagine that, $130 million. That'd get you on your way to being able to repair City Hall in Dallas, wouldn't it? And, you know, you're not supposed to be in elected politics forever. He made some speech. I think he said he'd won 18 races or something like that. Obviously, he was the Attorney General of Texas before. I don't know how many races he's run. I can't believe it's that many. The man is younger than Trump by 4 or 5 years. Boy, was he looking tired and old, though. I know he's nowhere near like Biden. I'm not suggesting that at all. He's totally in control of his faculties. And, I didn't have a problem with the guy. And I know that the pro-Paxton people bashed him up and down all day long. Rhino, 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 rhino. Worst thing ever. You know what? Pick 50. Make a list of 50 problems in politics. Was John Cornyn in your top 50? Make a list of 50 problems just in the state of Texas politics. Is John Cornyn in your top 50? He wouldn't have made mine. I'm going to tell you that. And the voting record, it's probably not going to look very different when Paxton gets in there. These people, they're voting party line the vast majority of the time. The only time that they don't vote party, that's when you hear about the vote, when you've got typically a reliable person, or you've got a swing vote, somebody that's got a beef with Trump, for example. And then it makes the news. Then it will last a few cycles. But for the vast majority of the time, these people, they're all in lockstep. They're all getting in line. So I didn't have a huge problem, I have to say, with John Cornyn. In any case, I voted Paxton, as I said. I also voted for Chip Roy, who lost to Mays Middleton. And, I found it was really difficult to get accurate news in this election, or even I found myself not trusting anybody's opinion and just throwing the rhino label around, throwing the deep state label, the Austin swamp, and I was kind of in a bind. I didn't really know what to do. So, I'm not great at the election predictions. Speaking of which, Kalshi, however you say that, which I think that's an online betting app, but it's proven to be accurate for many of these elections because unlike the fake, phony, baloney polls, with the app, Kalshi, people are actually putting their money where their mouth is. And as of right now, the market, which certainly can swing many times before November and likely tighten up as that's how things go, but right now, Kalshi is predicting a Paxton win in November. So we'll see. If you go back to the March 3rd primary, the voting turnout, it was much greater than in the runoff, which is typical, which is why we should not be having elections on a monthly basis. In Texas, we have to stop doing this. We can't be voting every single month in Texas. In Dallas, every election costs a lot of money. And the more voting that goes on, the more likely there is to be problems. So we shouldn't be doing it so frequently, especially basically Memorial Day weekend. Should we be having a vote that whoever is going to be the senator, well, Ken Paxton, he's 63, but who knows? If he wins, he could be the senator for the next 20 years, the way things go, or more. Talarico, 36. He's my age, but I dread even thinking about Talarico as the senator. But anyway, I wanted to see the vote breakdown for March 3rd, and Paxton scored over 1 million votes. Cornyn scored over 1 million votes. He obviously beat Paxton on March 3rd, but not enough to avoid the runoff. Talarico earned over 1 million votes, but below individually Paxton and Cornyn. Now, obviously, he's going to pick up most of Jasmine Crockett's votes. I think she scored under 1 million. I didn't pull her number, but I think Talarico won 52% of the vote on March 3rd. So presumably he's going to pick up most of those Crockett votes. But on the other hand, Paxton, in addition to picking up most of the Cornyn votes, he's also probably going to get Wesley Hunt's votes. Wesley Hunt, you can't forget, I think he scored about 20% of the vote on March 3rd, the freshman congressman from Houston, who basically came out of nowhere. And honestly, he's probably the reason that Cornyn didn't make it over the line, possibly. So Talarico, I know, a frightening prospect to think that he could be the U.S. Senator from Texas. I don't think that's going to happen. Kalshi doesn't think it's going to happen, and all the people that have bet money on it. But this was a campaign ad that was produced before the GOP runoff. I'm going to play it. This is just the minister, the pastor in training, the Christian seminarian, whatever he is, James Talarico, former public school teacher, currently in the Texas legislature. This is him in his own words, plus a little bit from President Trump.
The Democrats have a weird candidate.
God is non-binary. There are many more than two biological sexes. In fact, there are 6. It is now existential that we try to reduce our meat consumption. The American flag is such a complicated symbol for most of us. Prophetic voices like Jesus have helped me reckon with my own whiteness, my own masculinity. Our southern border should be like our front porch. There should be a giant welcome mat out front. No need to sit and cry over, your whiteness or your masculinity. They're going to call me a radical leftist.
Something that you love that's not family or friends.
I love, I'm just saying this because it's on my mind, the trans children.
The Democrats have a weird candidate.
Low T Talarico, 2 weeks from Texas.
What a great ad. What a highly effective ad. And it's James Talarico entirely in his own words. And they know, the Democrats, they know they have such a serious problem with this guy. And he is just, the rhetoric, the newspeak, the insanity is, I think it's going to be too difficult to overcome. And of course, now they're trying to pretend that James Talarico, he has a girlfriend. Right before the GOP runoff, this girlfriend allegedly was floated.
Are you a homosexual?
And, that's about as believable as if Lindsey Graham announced that he had a girlfriend. So that's how much anybody is believing that. I think Talarico, he is going to be a confirmed bachelor pretty soon. Speaking of which, Cory Booker, the New Jersey senator, did he get married? Maybe he did. Nobody's believing that one either. So that's Talarico, the next great white hope for the Democrats in Texas. And I think the day after, I've got another cut here, the day after the GOP runoff, they had Talarico sit down with the CBS affiliate here and Ed O'Keefe, apparently. And Ed O'Keefe asked him a couple of awkward questions. And let's hear Talarico again in his own words. I've got the cut here.
So they're running a handful of highlights of things you've said in the past, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond or clarify. In 2021, in a speech during debate over transgender issues, you said God is non-binary. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think I was being intentionally provocative with that statement. But what it means is that God can't be defined by human categories. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, says that in Christ there is neither male nor female. I'm always going to stand up for Texans who are being picked on by the most powerful, most corrupt politicians in the country, and I'm going to continue doing that in this race and hopefully in the U.S. Senate.
You call it intentionally provocative. Do you regret describing it that way or talking about God that way?
There are some statements that I've made that I certainly regret. There are statements that I've made where I've missed the mark. I'll be the first to admit that. But Ken Paxton is intentionally clipping my cringy comments to distract from his career of corruption.
Well, at least Talarico, low T, at least he could admit that the comments were cringy, especially that weird one about the trans kids. He was asked, tell us what's something you love. What's something that you love? Why don't you just say pistachio ice cream or something like that? Or iced coffee? Or, sitting out on the patio when it's 75 degrees. Why don't you say something like that? No, the trans kids are on my mind. It's just, who would even think to say that? That's anyway, halfway, even a quarter, marginally normal.
You think you're afraid of Trump? You should see how afraid of Trump I am.
Can you wrap up, please?
Let's turn Texas blue. We want to turn Texas blue. It's already a purple state. It's pink. Let's turn it blue. Why do you want to turn Texas blue? I don't get it. Why don't you move to California? Why don't you move to Washington State? Why don't you move to Massachusetts? Why don't you move to New York or Michigan? Or why don't you go move somewhere else to a blue state if you want to live in a blue state? There are plenty of them, and they have all the climate coverages. Oh, it's too expensive to live in California and New York and Massachusetts. Why is that? Why is that, do you think? Oh, could it be because of all the Democrats that have been elected there over the last 30, 40 years in those states, who their sole mission in life is to tax the bleep out of you while personally enriching themselves? And you just want to bring that to Texas? Yes, I know corruption goes both ways, both sides of the aisle. I know we have plenty of Republicans here with problems. I'm not saying that. But you just want to turn the state blue so that way you can just have more welfare programs and easier access to abortion. That's basically what you want, right? Go move to states where that's already available. Go move there. I'm sure they'll get you on all the welfare vouchers so you can live in a crappy apartment that's probably in front of multiple violent homeless encampments. Because that's what happens. We got enough Democrats right here in Dallas, by the way. Look at the property tax rate for the city. City of Dallas property tax rate is the highest of all the cities by a long shot. It's much higher than Austin's by a long shot. And how about Dallas ISD? Actually, this is a good segue into my next topic. So here in Texas, or I guess a lot of places, Mississippi as well, where I used to live, we've got Atmos is the gas company. And, most of my appliances are electric, heating, cooling, the oven, the dryer, mostly electric. But most people would still have gas for the hot water in their house. That's where I have. I actually have it. I own a house in District 1. It also has... the heat is gas as well. So anyway, this definitely affects me personally. But Atmos is raising rates for anybody who is a gas customer in Dallas by about $9 per month. It's going to start in June, I believe. And the rationale, allegedly, is all of the infrastructure upgrades to the underground pipes that Atmos has had to invest in to justify the rates. And the city of Dallas, the council, they were considering appealing a settlement that they reached with Atmos, which slightly cut what Atmos was trying to get. Atmos was trying to get, obviously, as much as they could, and Dallas chipped away at it by a few $1 million, cut about $4 million. But the city council still was considering an appeal, which would have to go to the Railroad Commission, which, for those of you, whether you're inside or outside of Texas, you probably don't know what the hell that is. It has nothing to do with railroads anymore. It has a lot to do with the oil and gas and the utilities. Well, they would have been the agency to decide. And it's a Republican-controlled agency because Texas, and it's a statewide elected office. And guess what? They weren't going to produce a favorable outcome for a blue city like Dallas trying to sue the gas company. So this was a case where the city council, I think, made the right move. Nobody wants to pay more for utilities. Everything is going up, of course. But then Kara Mendelson, the councilwoman from District 12, who has a much better command of the budget and finances than most everybody else on the council, she made a connection during the debate that I did not make myself about the recent. Well, let me go ahead and play the cut, and then we'll talk about it.
For my colleagues to think about are the comments made about the price sensitivity of our residents. I think that's very important. I think we do hear from residents saying all the utility bills are going up. But yet, we also saw them vote to increase a DISD bond to the largest ever. And so as we are entering budget season, I would say to you, the totality of your residents' budget needs to be considered, and that includes their tax rate.
Yeah, so apparently people email the city council. I don't have numbers on that, but apparently people will email city councilors about the utility rates, the water, the gas, for example. I guess they can't do much about electric rates. And Kara Mendelson pointed out, maybe some of these people who are concerned about their gas bill going up, how many of them turned out to the Dallas ISD bond election, which passed 100%, all the propositions, $6.2 billion worth of bonds will be issued, the largest in state history, double the last bond that was largely passed in 2020 through Dallas ISD. They're going to build all these brand new schools. Most people didn't show up to vote. Closer to 0% than 20% showed up to vote in that election earlier this month. 8% approximately of eligible voters showed up. Well over 70% of them supported increasing their own property taxes. And guess what? You know what? Everybody who didn't show up to vote in that election, they voted yes. They voted to increase their own property taxes. Idiots. Morons. You know what? I'm glad we're moving some of these elections to November, but you're still an idiot if you didn't show up to that. You better not complain about your gas bill if you didn't show up to vote in that election. No, which is most everybody in Dallas didn't vote up, didn't show up to vote, pardon me, in that election. Now, the property tax increase is not going to be $9 a month. It's going to be less than that. It's going to be the price of a cup of coffee a month. The price of a cup of coffee. They literally still say that. They literally still say that. Well, guess what? You know what? A cup of coffee at Starbucks is about $4 now for a black hot coffee, which 95% of people that go into Starbucks don't like coffee. They like frou-frou, fruffalata, whipped cream, frou-fa nonsense. That's about $7 or $8 or $10 maybe by the time you put enough pumps or whatever into it. So I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. All right, I'm going to wrap it up soon. I think we got to talk about bums and homeless, junkie, bum, criminal, vagrant, mental patient, ne'er-do-well, recidivist, reprobates. I got a good story here. Before I get into that, good reminder, if you haven't already, please make sure, if you're in one of those big streaming apps, Spotify, Apple, to give the show, the Real Texas Radio Podcast, 5 stars, give me a like, subscribe, download those episodes, add a comment there if you'd be so kind, letting other listeners know what a great show the Real Texas Radio Podcast is for local news, totally free, ad-free as well. And follow the show on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin, where I post the video, the companion video for all of the audio and all of the stories that I read on the show, and much more. There's much more on X as well, of course. All right, Austin Justice, great account I recommend following. And he keeps on top of all of the bleep bums in Travis County, where they have a Soros-funded, horrible DA, Jose Garza. Listen to this story. Austin man breaks into storage units across the city. Despite dozens of prior charges, DA Jose Garza's office dismisses 2 of his pending burglary cases because he hadn't been arrested in 60 days. Oh, what a star. Head of the class. He's managed to not be arrested for 2 whole months in a row. Gold star. He'd actually burglarized 29 more units in that window. 29 burglaries. Police just hadn't caught him yet. Joshua Hunt, described in burglary affidavits as a documented, prolific storage unit burglar, now has 72 Travis County cases. And police can't find him. Wow, talk about a second chance. Talk about a 9th chance, a 29th chance. 72 cases. This is a white guy. He's got the marks all over his face like a meth head. And I'm guessing he's probably not paying rent or a mortgage anywhere. I'm going to guess he's homeless. He's been getting a pass for years. In 2021, caught at a storage unit wedging cardboard under the sliding doors, DA declined. In 2023, 12 burglary-related charges, 9 declined. 3 pled down to 18 months concurrent. In 2025, caught on dash cam burglarizing a car, hit with 2 more storage unit burglaries, and arrested with drugs. What a shock. All dismissed or rejected. Then in May 2026, 32 new burglary warrants. 72 cases, about 60 related to property crime, 0 jury trials, now a fugitive. There's a case like that just about every day in Austin, in Travis County. Austin Justice on X. I recommend a follow. And we need somebody like that in Dallas. We need a Dallas Justice account. All right, this is probably a good time to wrap it up. Thank you for tuning in once again to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. Your listenership is appreciated. Keep tuning in. Tell a friend to listen to the Real Texas Radio Podcast, and I will catch you on the next episode.